You already know what you want to do. You just don't trust yourself to do it right. Not because you're incapable, not because the situation is unclear, but because the moment you're about to move forward, something pulls you back. That quiet voice, that second guess, that feeling that whatever you choose, it might be the wrong one. And here's what makes it worse. You've been here before. You've stood at this exact crossroads, talked yourself out of it, waited for more certainty, and the certainty never came. So you waited again and again. You know what you should do, but knowing and doing, those are not the same thing. You watched the window close. You watched other people move while you stayed in the same place, running the same loop, asking the same questions, arriving at the same hesitation. And now you're starting to wonder if there's something fundamentally wrong with the way your mind works. There isn't, but there is something your mind is doing that Buddhism understood long before psychology gave it a name. And you're not alone in this. This pattern, this loop of knowing and still not trusting, has been observed for thousands of years. And what Buddhism says about it might completely change how you see your own mind. That's what we're going to look at today. And you felt this, that moment when you're right on the edge of something, and instead of stepping forward, your mind floods with reasons why you might be wrong. Buddhism has a word for the mechanism underneath that feeling. It's called sankharas. It translates roughly as mental formations, the deeply conditioned patterns your mind has built up over a lifetime through experience, repetition, and emotion. Not your personality, not your character, your conditioning. And this matters more than most people realize, because your doubt isn't coming from nowhere. It's coming from a pattern. Your mind learned to run, to protect you. At some point, something went wrong. You trusted your judgment and it didn't work out. Or you were told your instincts were off, or the people around you questioned your choices often enough that your mind started questioning them first, before anyone else could. And here's the thing about that. Your mind was doing what minds do. It was adapting. It was learning. It saw a risk, felt pain, and built a response system to prevent that pain from happening again. The problem is that system doesn't know the difference between a situation that genuinely requires more caution and a situation where you're actually ready, where you actually know what you need to know, where trusting yourself is exactly what's required. It fires anyway, every time, because that's what patterns do. They don't evaluate, they execute. And that's where it gets harder, because the doubt doesn't feel like a pattern. It feels like clarity. It feels like wisdom. It feels like you're finally being honest with yourself about your limitations. But that feeling is the pattern speaking, not your actual clarity, not your actual wisdom, not your actual self. Buddhism draws a distinction here that most self-help frameworks miss entirely. There's a difference between discernment and self-doubt. Discernment is your mind doing its job, gathering information, assessing a situation, helping you navigate wisely. It listens, it weighs, it arrives somewhere. Self-doubt is something else entirely. It's your conditioned pattern interrupting that process before it can finish. It doesn't gather information. It questions the information gatherer. It doesn't weigh the situation. It questions whether you're capable of weighing it. It's not insight, it's interference. And the interference feels like insight. That's what makes it so difficult to untangle. That's why you keep coming back to the same question, wondering why you still can't trust yourself. After everything you've been through, after everything you've learned, after everything you've survived, because the pattern doesn't care how much you've grown. It was built before the growth. It runs underneath it. The Buddha said something that speaks directly to this. He said, the mind is everything. What you think, you become. Most people hear that as motivation, but it's also a warning, because if your mind is constantly running a pattern that says you can't trust yourself, that pattern is quietly shaping your reality. Not your circumstances, not your opportunities. Your own mind is narrowing the world into something that matches what it believes. You stop reaching for things, not because you don't want them, because the doubt arrives first, before desire even gets a chance to surface. And you know this feeling. You've been here before. You've watched an opportunity arrive and talked yourself out of it before you even tried. You've made a decision that felt right, then immediately started dismantling it in your head until it stopped feeling right. You've asked for advice not because you didn't know what to do, but because some part of you hoped someone else would confirm what you already felt was true. And when they confirmed it, you still doubted it. Because the doubt isn't about information. It's about the relationship your mind has with its own conclusions. That's not weakness. That's a mind that learned to distrust its own knowing. And there's an important difference between those two things. Because here's what's actually happening underneath the doubt. There's a Buddhist concept called citta, which refers to the quality of the mind itself, not the thoughts passing through it, not the emotions surfacing and dissolving, but the awareness that's doing the experiencing, the thing that notices the doubt, the thing that watches the second guessing, the thing that's listening to these words right now and recognizing something in them. That is citta, and citta is not broken by doubt. It's obscured by it, the way clouds cover the sun without changing what the sun is. The sun doesn't stop being the sun. It doesn't stop generating light. It just becomes temporarily harder to reach, harder to feel, harder to use as a guide. Your clarity is still there. Your knowing is still there. It's not missing. It's not gone. It's being covered by a layer of conditioned noise that your mind has been running for so long that you started to mistake the noise for the signal. And that's a very different problem than being fundamentally flawed or uncertain. One is a weather pattern. The other is who you are. Buddhism has spent centuries distinguishing between these two things. The content of the mind and the ground of the mind. The content shifts. Thoughts arrive and leave. Doubt rises and falls. Confidence comes and goes. Fear speaks loudly some days and quietly on others. All of it moves. All of it changes. But the ground, the awareness underneath all of it, that doesn't change with it, that doesn't waver with the weather, that doesn't need to earn its right to exist by being consistently certain. The doubt is weather. You are not the weather. There's something that happens when you've been inside self-doubt long enough. You stop seeing it as a visitor. You start seeing it as a resident, as part of the furniture, as just the way you are. And that shift is the most damaging part, not the doubt itself, but the moment you stop noticing it as something happening to you and start treating it as something you are. Buddhism has been very clear about this distinction for a very long time. The teaching is called anatta, not self. The recognition that none of the contents of your mind, your thoughts, your feelings, your patterns are actually you. They arrive, they pass, they tell stories, they make noise, but they are not the one experiencing them. And this includes the doubt. The doubt is not you. It's something arising in you, something moving through the field of your awareness, the way a cloud moves through the sky. The sky doesn't become the cloud. It holds the cloud. It allows it to move. It remains what it is. Whether the cloud is there or not, you are the sky, not the weather. But here's what nobody tells you about this. Most approaches to self-doubt try to fix the content. They give you new thoughts to replace the old ones, new affirmations, new narratives, a different story to tell yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. And sometimes that helps in the short term. It can feel like progress. It can feel like you're finally getting somewhere, but it doesn't change the pattern. It just gives the pattern new material to work with. Because the mind that learned to doubt itself doesn't stop doubting when you hand it better thoughts. It doubts the better thoughts. It says, "That sounds good," but you're just saying that. You don't actually believe it. You're trying to convince yourself. And the fact that you have to try is proof that it isn't true. And so the new story becomes just another thing to doubt, another voice in the loop, another layer on top of what was already there. Buddhism doesn't approach this by adding new content. It approaches it by changing the relationship between the mind and its content, not fighting the doubt, not replacing it, not arguing with it until it retreats, seeing it not as truth, not as signal, not as a reliable report on the state of your inner world, but as movement, as weather, as something the mind is doing right now, in this moment, that is not required to define your next step. Here's where most people get stuck when they try to work with self-doubt. They try to prove the doubt wrong. They look for evidence of their capability. They make lists. They remind themselves of past successes. They search for reasons to trust themselves. And none of it lands. Not fully. Not for long. Because the doubt isn't asking for evidence. It's a pattern. And patterns don't respond to evidence the way arguments do. You can show a pattern 1,000 reasons it's wrong about you, and the pattern will still fire the next time the trigger appears. Not because you haven't tried hard enough, because patterns aren't logical. They're conditioned. They were built through repetition, not through reasoning. And they aren't dismantled through reasoning either. What dismantles a pattern is sustained awareness, consistent noticing, returning again and again to the same quiet act of seeing the pattern clearly and not identifying with it. This is what mindfulness actually is at its core. Not a technique for relaxation, not a way to feel calmer in difficult moments, but a practice of seeing clearly enough to distinguish between what's happening in you and what's true about you. The doubt is happening. That's real. It's present. It has weight and texture and history, but it is not what's true about you. And the more often you can locate that distinction in real time, in the moments when the doubt arrives, in the moments when you're about to make a decision, and something inside flinches back, the less power the doubt has to shape what comes next. Not because you fought it, not because you defeated it, because you stopped confusing it with yourself. You saw it as a pattern. You let it be a pattern, and then you moved anyway. Something is shifting in how you understand this. Think about it this way. The relationship you have with self-doubt right now is probably one of two things. Either you believe it, you take it at face value. You treat it as reliable information about who you are and what you can do. Or you fight, you resist, you try to push it back, talk yourself out of it, force your way through it with willpower. Buddhism suggests a third option that most people never consider. Be curious about it, not in a way that indulges or feeds it, but the way a thoughtful observer might examine a recurring weather pattern. What is this exactly? When does it arrive? What triggers it? What does it feel like in the body before it becomes a voice in the head? Because self-doubt doesn't live only in the mind. It lives in the body first. A tightening somewhere, a holding of breath, a subtle contraction that happens before the thoughts even form. And when you start to notice those body signals, you get more time. You catch the pattern earlier, before it's already turned into a full internal argument. That early noticing is everything, not because you can stop the doubt, but because you can choose how you respond to it before it has already made the choice for you. There's a quality in Buddhist practice called sati, mindfulness, often translated simply as awareness. But what it actually refers to is more specific. It's the quality of remembering to be present, of returning, of noticing when you've been pulled into the pattern and finding your way back. Not just once, not in a single session of sitting still, but as a continuous practice, a continuous returning. And this is what working with self-doubt looks like in real life. Not a moment of breakthrough where the doubt disappears forever, but a practice of returning to presence, returning to clarity, returning to the awareness underneath the weather. Every time you notice the pattern running, you return. Every time you catch yourself mid-loop, in the middle of the second guessing, you return. Not with judgment, not with frustration at how long it's taking, with the same quiet patience you'd offer someone you care about, who is learning something difficult. Because you are learning something difficult. You're learning to see through a pattern that has been running for years, maybe decades. That's not a small thing. And it doesn't happen in a single realization. It happens in the 10,000 small moments of noticing, in the 10,000 returns, in the accumulation of seeing that gradually teaches the mind a different way of relating to itself. The Buddha said, "You yourself must strive. The Buddhas only point the way." That's not a challenge. It's a recognition that the source of your clarity was never outside you. It was never in someone else's confirmation. It was never in a perfect set of circumstances that finally made the path feel safe enough to walk. It was here. It has always been here, waiting underneath the noise for you to stop confusing the noise with the ground. And what that practice produces over time is not the absence of doubt, not a self that never questions itself. Those would be their own problems. What it produces is a self that can sit with uncertainty without being paralyzed by it. A self that can hear the doubt without having to believe it. A self that can feel unsure and still move forward. Not because the unsureness has gone away, but because it no longer has to be resolved before action is possible. This is what confidence actually is in the Buddhist sense. Not certainty, not the absence of fear or doubt. It's trust in awareness itself. Trust in the capacity to see. Trust in the ground underneath the weather. You don't need to eliminate the doubt. You need to stop giving it the job of making your decisions for you. It can be there. It can speak. It can make its case. And then you can act anyway, from the ground, from the clarity, from the knowing that was always there, underneath the noise. And here's what that means for you practically. Most of the moments where self-doubt stops you aren't big, dramatic crossroads. They're small. A conversation you didn't start, an idea you kept to yourself, a choice you handed to someone else because you weren't sure enough to make it. The accumulation of those small moments is where the real cost lives. Not in the big decisions, in the quiet daily erosion of not trusting yourself, in the ordinary moments. Buddhism doesn't ask you to fix everything at once. It asks you to notice what's happening right now, in this moment, in this ordinary, unremarkable moment, where the pattern is running, and you have the chance to see it. Not for awareness, not suppression, clarity, not fighting the pattern, being the one who sees it. Each time you catch it early, something shifts, not dramatically, not permanently in a single moment, but the direction changes. You start to recognize the pattern's texture. You start to know its timing. You start to feel it arrive in the body before it becomes a full story in the mind. And that recognition is not a small thing. That recognition is the beginning of a different relationship with your own mind. It means the pattern is no longer invisible, and invisible patterns have all the power. Seen patterns have less. You can work with what you can see. You can't work with what you're completely inside of. So the practice is simple, not easy, but simple. Notice, return, move anyway, again and again, without expecting it to feel comfortable, without waiting for the doubt to approve, because it won't approve. That's not its job. Your job is to move from what you actually know, from the ground underneath the noise, from the awareness that was always there. The doubt can come along. It doesn't get to drive. But here's what most people don't realize until much later. The practice doesn't get easier because the doubt stops coming. It gets easier because you stop being surprised by it. You stop needing it to be gone before you can move. And that shift, quiet as it is, changes everything about how you exist inside your own mind. Consider what it would mean to go through a single day differently. Not to eliminate the doubt, not to become someone who never hesitates, but to catch the pattern early enough that you're the one choosing what happens next, not the pattern. That moment when the doubt rises, that tightening, that familiar pull toward waiting, you notice it. You don't fight it. You don't try to argue yourself out of it. You just see it. There it is, the old response, the learned hesitation. You see it, and then something small, one step forward anyway, not a grand declaration, not a permanent commitment, just this one step from where you actually are, with the doubt still present, with the uncertainty still real. Over time, you'll find that those small steps accumulate, not into certainty, into something more durable, into a quiet familiarity with your own knowing, a recognition that you've been here before, that you moved anyway, that the fear didn't destroy you, that the doubt didn't have the final word. And each time that happens, the pattern loses a little ground. Not because you fought it, because you outgrew it, because you stopped feeding it with your belief in it and started using the energy of noticing instead. That's the Buddhist path with self-doubt. Not a battle, a practice of seeing, of returning, of moving from the ground instead of from the weather. The doubt will still come. It may always come, but you are not waiting for it to stop. You are learning to move through it, and that changes everything. And that's the thing about all of this. The doubt you feel isn't the enemy of your progress. In a strange way, it's been trying to serve you. It's been trying to protect something important, even if it no longer knows what. You don't have to be angry at it. You don't have to shame yourself for having it. You don't have to pretend it isn't there. You just have to stop mistaking it for clarity. Stop giving it the authority to make decisions on your behalf. Because underneath the doubt, underneath the pattern, underneath everything that learned to second guess, there is something that already knows. Not perfectly, not without uncertainty, not with the kind of absolute confidence that makes risk feel like nothing, but enough, usually quietly enough. And that knowing has always been there, covered sometimes, quieted sometimes, interrupted before it could finish speaking, but there. Buddhism doesn't ask you to become someone new. It asks you to see through what's covering, who you already are, to find the awareness underneath the weather, to trust the ground more than the pattern, to move from that place, even when the doubt is still present, even when certainty hasn't arrived, even when you still feel the pull toward one more moment of waiting. That's the shift, not from doubt to certainty, from believing the doubt to being the one who sees it. And you can start that right now, not tomorrow, not after the doubt passes, right now, in this moment. With the doubt still present, you can notice it, name it quietly, let it be what it is, and choose anyway. That's enough. For now, that's enough. If this kind of reflection helps you see your own mind more clearly, consider subscribing. Every video on this channel is made to help you look a little more honestly, not at what to do with your life, but at what's actually happening inside it. Take care of yourself.